What if? A sleep story. Welcome to the Sleep Factory. A quiet place where stories unfold slowly and sleep comes gently. Tonight we have a calm and reflective tale to ease you into rest. So close your eyes, settle in, and let the story carry you. The morning light filtered through the tall windows of Daniel's apartment, casting long shadows across the polished wooden floors. Outside, the streets of New Berlin stretched out in perfect geometric lines, the architecture a blend of old European grandeur and newer, more imposing structures that had risen in the decades following the Great War's end in 1943. Daniel Morgan stirred slowly in his bed, the soft cotton sheets rustling as he reached for the brass alarm clock on his nightstand. 7:30. The same time he woke every morning for the past 15 years, working as a translator for the Ministry of Cultural Exchange. His apartment overlooked Amerikanerstrasse, one of the designated districts where American families had been relocated after the reorganization. He padded barefoot to the kitchen, his footsteps muffled by the thick Persian rugs that covered most of the floor. The coffee maker, a sleek German design, hummed quietly as it brewed his morning cup. Through the window, he could see other residents of the district beginning their day. Mrs. Chen from the apartment below was tending to her small balcony garden, growing herbs that reminded her of home. The Kowalski family was loading their children into their modest sedan, heading to the American Heritage School, where the youngsters learned about their ancestors' homeland. The coffee was rich and dark, a luxury he'd grown accustomed to. In this new world, American citizens living in the incorporated territories received certain privileges: better housing, education, healthcare, as long as they followed the guidelines. Daniel's knowledge of languages had made him valuable to the administration, and valuable people lived comfortably. He dressed carefully in his pressed gray suit, the fabric wool from the finest mills in Bavaria. His morning routine was methodical, calming in its predictability. Shave with the straight razor his father had given him, though his father had never lived to see this world. Comb his dark hair back with the lavender-scented pomade that came in monthly supply packages. Polish his leather shoes until they gleamed. The trolley ride to work took exactly 23 minutes. Daniel sat in his usual seat, third row from the front, watching the city flow past the windows. The architecture told the story of the New Order. Classical American buildings from before the war stood alongside the newer constructions, all of it maintained with Germanic precision. The streets were clean, the people well-dressed and orderly. Crime was virtually non-existent. The trains ran on time. At Friedrich Roosevelt Plaza, named for the American president who had negotiated the peaceful transition, Daniel disembarked with the other morning commuters. The ministry building rose before them, its facade carved with eagles and oak leaves, symbols that had once meant different things to different people, but now represented the unified administrative order. "Guten Morgen, Daniel," called Klaus from the security desk, his English accent still thick with Germanic inflection after all these years. "Good morning, Klaus," Daniel replied, showing his identification card with its distinctive blue stripe, marking him as a translator-class citizen. The elevator carried him smoothly to the 7th floor, where the translation department occupied a series of quiet offices overlooking the central courtyard. Daniel's workspace was by the window, furnished with a mahogany desk, a comfortable leather chair, and shelves lined with dictionaries in dozens of languages. Today's assignment was routine: translating cultural reports from the Pacific administrative regions, where former American territories had been reorganized into efficient provinces. His supervisor, Herr Brennan, had once been a literature professor at Columbia University. Now he oversaw the delicate work of translating between the old American idioms and the new administrative language. The work was important, they were told. It helped preserve American cultural heritage while ensuring smooth integration with the broader administrative system. "Daniel, we have some interesting material today," Brennan said, setting a stack of documents on the desk. Personal letters from families in the California province. They're requesting permission to visit relatives in the Texas Administrative District. Daniel began reading, his pen moving smoothly across the translation forms. The letters were touching. Grandmother wanting to see grandchildren, siblings separated by the new provincial boundaries, hoping to reunite for holidays. Most of the requests would be approved. Family unity was encouraged, as long as it didn't interfere with work assignments or regional stability. The morning passed quietly. Daniel worked steadily, occasionally pausing to gaze out at the courtyard where cherry trees bloomed in perfectly maintained rows. At noon, the bells chimed from the cathedral across the square, calling people to lunch. The ministry's cafeteria served excellent food, hearty German dishes alongside American favorites like hamburgers and apple pie, though everything was prepared with European attention to quality and presentation. Daniel sat with his colleagues, mostly other Americans who had found their niche in the new administrative system. They discussed weekend plans, the weather, their children's progress in school. Normal conversations, comfortable conversations. "My daughter Sarah is learning violin," mentioned Janet from the communications department. "The music program in the American schools is really quite good. She'll be performing Beethoven next month." "That's wonderful," Daniel replied, cutting into his schnitzel. "I remember when I was her age, I wanted to learn piano. Maybe I should take it up again." "You should," said Marcus, who handled economic reports. "The community center on Amerikanerstrasse has adult classes. They say learning new skills keeps the mind sharp." After lunch, Daniel returned to his desk to find a special assignment waiting. Personal correspondence from a family in what had once been called Oregon, now part of the Northwestern Administrative Region. The letter was from a man named Thomas Webb, writing to his brother in the Dakota Territory. Daniel began translating, but something in the tone caught his attention. The language was carefully neutral, but between the lines, he sensed a deeper story. Thomas wrote about the beauty of the landscape, the efficiency of the local administration, the excellent schools for his children. But there were tiny hesitations in the phrasing, subtle word choices that suggested things left unsaid. Daniel translated faithfully, noting in his margins the emotional subtext that wouldn't appear in the official version. This was part of his job, to understand not just the words, but the feelings behind them. The administration valued psychological insight as much as linguistic accuracy. As the afternoon wore on, sunlight slanted through the office windows, warming the polished wood surfaces. Daniel found himself thinking about his own family, scattered now across various administrative regions. His sister lived in the Southern Atlantic District, his cousin in the Great Lakes Province. They exchanged letters regularly, each one passing through the ministry for translation and cultural analysis before delivery. The system worked, Daniel reflected. People were housed, fed, educated, employed. The infrastructure functioned smoothly. Healthcare was universal and efficient. Crime was minimal. Wars between nations had become a thing of the past under the unified European administrative system that now managed most of the world's affairs. At 5 o'clock precisely, Daniel closed his desk and prepared to leave. The trolley ride home was as smooth as the morning journey, carrying him back through the ordered streets to Amerikanerstrasse. In the market near his apartment building, vendors sold fresh bread, local vegetables, and imported goods from around the administrative regions. Daniel stopped to buy apples from the fruit seller, the elderly German woman who had learned English specifically to serve the American district. "These are very good today," she said, selecting the ripest ones for his bag. "Sweet like candy." "Thank you, Frau Müller," Daniel replied. "They look perfect." His evening routine was as methodical as his morning. Dinner at the small table by the window, watching the street lamps flicker on as dusk settled over the district. Radio programs featured classical music interspersed with news from around the administrative territories, crop reports, infrastructure projects, cultural celebrations. The news was always positive, focusing on progress and cooperation between different ethnic and national communities. After dinner, Daniel sat in his comfortable armchair and opened a book, a collection of American short stories published by the Cultural Preservation Press. The stories were familiar favorites, edited slightly to remove references that might cause confusion or distress, but otherwise unchanged. Reading them, Daniel could almost imagine himself back in the world his parents had described, where America stretched from sea to shining sea under its own flag. But that world existed now only in books and carefully preserved memories. This world, orderly, safe, prosperous, was the one he knew. And most days, that felt like enough. As night deepened, Daniel prepared for bed with the same careful routine he followed each evening. He set his clothes out for tomorrow, wound his alarm clock, and checked that his identification papers were ready for the morning commute. Outside his window, the district settled into quiet rest. Street lights cast gentle pools of illumination on the empty sidewalks. In the distance, the soft sound of a train whistle echoed across the city as the night express carried passengers and cargo between the administrative regions. Daniel pulled the thick curtains closed and slipped between the cool sheets. Tomorrow would bring more letters to translate, more stories to interpret, more lives to help navigate the careful balance between memory and adaptation. It was important work, meaningful work, even if it sometimes felt like walking a narrow path between different worlds. The pillow was soft beneath his head, filled with down from the mountain regions to the south. The mattress had been made by craftsmen in the industrial districts, built to last for decades. Quality was important in this new world. Things were made to endure, to provide comfort and reliability for the long term. As sleep began to claim him, Daniel's mind drifted through the fragments of the day, the cherry blossoms in the ministry courtyard, the careful words of Thomas Webb's letter, the gentle conversation with Frau Müller at the market, the soft voices of his colleagues discussing their children's music lessons. It was a quiet life, a measured life. Some mornings, Daniel woke with half-remembered dreams of a different world, one where American cities had different names, where the flag had different stars, where history had unfolded along different paths. But those dreams faded quickly in the warm light of his comfortable apartment, dissolved by the routine of coffee and morning news. replaced by the solid reality of his productive work and secure place in the community. In the building around him, other American families were settling into sleep. The Chens with their herb garden, the Kowalskis with their school-aged children, Janet from the communications department, whose daughter was learning violin, Marcus, who analyzed economic reports and recommended adult education classes. They were all part of something larger now, woven into the fabric of a world that had chosen order over chaos, efficiency over waste, cooperation over conflict. It wasn't the world their grandparents had imagined, but it was the world that existed. And in its own way, it was a world where people could find peace. The night settled deeper over New Berlin, over the administrative districts, over the carefully maintained provinces that stretched across continents. In his warm bed, Daniel Morgan slept the sleep of a man whose work was valued, whose life was secure, whose place in the world was clearly defined. And in his dreams sometimes, he walked through forests of cherry blossoms where every tree bloomed in perfect rows, where every path led exactly where it was supposed to go, where every story had already been written in languages that everyone could understand. They were gentle dreams, ordered dreams, dreams that carried him peacefully toward morning. The clock on his nightstand ticked quietly in the darkness, marking time in a world where time itself had been reorganized, restructured, made to serve the greater good. And Daniel slept on, safely sheltered in his small corner of this vast, efficient, carefully administered world, where every citizen had their place and every story eventually found its proper translation. Thank you for spending this time with us. If this story brought you comfort or helped you drift off, we'd love for you to like and subscribe to The Sleep Factory. Sweet dreams, and we'll see you again soon.